Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51% show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, as we mark the International Day to End Violence Against Women, we take a look at whether social media is a friend or foe. Also, why changing men's attitudes is vital when it comes to dealing with the issue. And a group of French male actors and comedians use the stage to give women victims a voice. Now, according to the United Nations, globally 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence at some point in her life. In recent years, social media has become a key platform in giving women a voice, especially when it comes to confronting violence. Men who've been accused of violent behaviour, especially prominent individuals, are now in danger of facing trial by Twitter. But Claire Williams takes a look at just how effective social media is as a tool.
This footage sent shockwaves through America and highlighted the power of social networks. Football player Ray Rice knocked out his then fiancée, now wife, Janae Palmer, in a hotel lift. The incident occurred in February. Rice pleaded not guilty in court and was suspended for 2 games. 7 months later, the entire video went viral online. Millions of Americans saw it. Thousands queued up to return their Rice jerseys.
Women should not be treated like that, and I absolutely am not fond of anything that he did.
Only after the public outcry did the Baltimore Ravens team decide to fire Rice. He was also banned indefinitely from the NFL. In Canada, the sacking of a radio host accused by several women of violent rape has sparked huge internet debate. Jian Ghomeshi posted a lengthy denial on his Facebook. Some of his fans are demanding online all the alleged victims give up their anonymity. Tired of hearing claims the women made it up, 2 journalists created the hashtag #BeenRapedNeverReported to tweet about their own experiences of assault. Sue Montgomery was the first to tweet.
I was terrified. I mean, my heart was pounding, I was shaking, I hit send, and the next thing I knew, it was this tsunami going around the world of women and men telling their stories in 140 characters.
Fearful internet trolls would attack her. The support she received was a pleasant surprise, and the experiment brought to light how common sexual assault is. But Sue Montgomery wants more than that. So does the director of this women's refuge in Paris's suburbs, who hopes the justice system will catch up with social networks.
I think behind the hashtag and behind the social networks, women absolutely must be able to make formal complaints and then have access to legal services.
For Françoise Brier, social networks' power is real, but online posts are only the tip of the iceberg.
And that report by Claire Williams. Now, as we just saw there, social media can be a vital tool when it comes to lifting the lid on the issue. In the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, nearly 1,000 people took to the streets in protest against a series of vicious public attacks on women. They were stripped naked by mobs of men and assaulted for simply wearing miniskirts. Mobile phone footage of the attacks was circulated widely via Twitter and other social media, prompting national outrage. As a result, more than 100 people were arrested over the events and charged with being drunk and disorderly. They were released on a cash bail of less than €1 or serve 2 weeks in jail. Now, with the likes of campaigns such as the UN's He for She initiative, the pressure is now on for more men to publicly denounce violence against women. But activists argue that's not going to change until men's attitudes themselves change. One global charity that's working hard to educate men on overcoming hostile behaviour is Promondo. Here's a clip of what they've been doing in South Africa in order to educate men about becoming fathers.
Worker. It was not easy to raise us. It was a tough game for him. My father was not available at all. Like it's a ghost. My brother Andrew now is expecting his first child.
I'm gonna need his help with the baby. I'm gonna need him to be more understanding and to be more hands-on.
There are things that I'm nervous about. What kind of a father am I going to be? Well, I'm worried that my brother Andrew might not be responsible enough. I want him to be there.
And joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Gary Barker, the International Director and Founder of Promundo. Gary, thanks for being with us. Just how much of that violent male behaviour is cultural versus physiological?
I think we're very careful not to blame culture on men's use of violence, because everywhere that we look, there's as many men, and more, if not more, who don't use violence than men who do use violence against female partners. So we see a lot more cause that has to do with the violence that men witness growing up. We know that men who witness their fathers or another man use violence against their mothers are 2.5 to 3 times more likely to use violence when they grow up. So as you saw in the film here, whether men see their fathers involved as you know, kind of caring fathers or fathers who use violence or model different violent behavior, we think is a key one. So we're really careful not to use culture as an excuse for men to use violence anywhere.
But how do you change those deeply ingrained ideas of aggressive masculinity, same places such as South Africa, as we saw there, or Brazil, or anywhere in the world?
Yeah, I mean, one is to acknowledge, and I think this has sometimes been the challenge, to acknowledge that men's lives are deeply affected and harmed and hurt by the violence that they've witnessed and experienced growing up. Men who use violence have typically seen it, experienced it at some point in their life growing up. This is not to make an excuse for it at any point, but to say we have to understand the harm that's done in men's own lives as they grow up if we want to break that cycle of their use of violence. So what we do in a lot of our work, whether it's school-based or engaging men in prenatal visits, or whether it's using sports and other places where men already hang out, is to tap into a belief that men who use violence are not happy men. They're not men who are finding some pleasure in this use of violence, but that really there is a deep well and a lot of voices of men out there who, if we make it safe for them to speak out, will say, hey, my life has been harmed by violence. I don't want to carry that on.
Gary, you've been quoted as saying that this violence comes from the stress of men from believing they have to be the provider. But that's not always the case, because you have many women these days who are also the providers in families. So is that really a factor?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be careful of, let's not make excuses for men's use of violence, but to say that among the stresses that men face, we have certainly created a lot more flexibility. That's what part of the women's rights movement and feminism has been about, that women can both have interesting and thoughtful and connected care, you know, their lives at home and in their family lives, and be providers outside, and that there's certainly a pressure on lots of women to now do both. So I don't want to undermine how much pressure women feel, and certainly those who are juggling childcare together with their professions, we know what that stress is. But to understand that men, particularly in the lowest income parts of the world, to not have access to income and a sense of livelihood and the identity that most men derive from that, to acknowledge that that's a huge strain on men, I think is an important starting point. And again, it's not to make excuses for men. It's to say this is one of the sources of stress that men face. And that's particularly why we're trying to find spaces where we know that stress comes to a fore. So we see that in many parts of the world, for example, there's sometimes a spike of men's use of violence against a pregnant partner. This stress of, oh, now I've got another mouth to feed, is a moment when we see a lot of violence show up. So we're trying to use the prenatal sector, and particularly prenatal visits for women, as a place to also reach out to male partners and provide the support so they don't end up using violence.
So are you witnessing a direct change as a result of your programs?
We are, when we're able to bring these approaches to bear and get staff who are either together with the health sector, education sector, or youth serving sector, when they're able to carry these out in a thoughtful and consistent way, we are able to measure changes. Our challenge is how we go from a few thousand to the millions who need to be reached with this, and that's why we're really trying to think together with UN Women that launched the He for She initiative, to think together with national governments to make engaging men part of their national plans on ending violence against women. So we can go from a few hundred to a few thousand.
Gary, finally, is there a difference in outlook these days between older and younger men?
I think there is a shift. I think younger men get that the norms have shifted. This is not okay. It doesn't mean that they've figured out new ways and, you know, kind of how to get along perfectly in their relationships with their female partners. But I do think there's a shift. I think that men this younger generation of men have seen their seen their mothers and seen women around them in schools and the workplace. I think they do realize that something is shifting there and that this is no longer an acceptable behavior, which makes me optimistic. In spite of the huge numbers in front of us, I'm cautiously or doggedly optimistic that, in fact, in a generation, we should be able to see this reduce, I hope.
Gary Barker, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And finally, here in France, according to government statistics, 1 in 10 women are the victim of domestic violence, with 1 dying every second day. To help get the message across about the urgency of the issue, a group of French actors and comedians are taking to the stage. At an event at the Sorbonne University here in Paris, they're reading out victims' testimonies in the hope of starting a conversation.
I am against polygamy. It creates hatred, which destroys the family. It's a mark of male domination.
Wounds of Women takes female speech and gives it to men. The aim of these actors gathered on stage is to change the way women are heard, viewed and regarded. The words are intimate, written in the first person and read aloud.
I was still underage when I ran away from home, and unfortunately I was taken in by a dodgy guy. So that's how I landed in the hell of prostitution and everything that goes with it.
Actors and singers, they are directed by the photographer Catherine Cabrol. It's a homage to all the women whose experiences are restaged.
This is material of an unbelievable force. And men's imaginations are boundless when it comes to hurting others, exploiting others, and particularly when it comes to exploiting and enslaving women.
The show is expected to be exported to other cities in France and Europe to encourage victims to break the silence.
And that's it for now. If you'd like to comment on what you've just seen, please head to our Facebook page, France24, full stop the 51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Thanks for your feedback so far, and please keep those comments rolling in. Until our next program, bye for now.